Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mary Rowe.
The moment you were all waiting for, where you were going to get to see Melissa Harris Perry. Yeah. I know, and I'm not her. I'm so sorry. I hope this is the only disappointment you've had over 2 days. Melissa could not, am I right? Melissa could not land. She couldn't get out of New Orleans, unfortunately. And so what you get instead are these illustrious folks, and Margaret, Newman, and I are anchoring this session to take us home. So you win a fabulous medal because you have the tenacity to be here to the bitter end, which is great. Say it again.
We're resilient.
You are resilient. Indeed you are, the way you started, exactly. And the other thing, it's always difficult at the end because not only are we standing between you and a fabulous drink, but we are standing between you and the wonderful Michelle Dorrans, who will be here for the finale. So don't even think of leaving your seat because you're going to hear fabulous ideas to sort of wrap us up over the last 2 days. And then you're going to see Michelle and her company dance. And then we're going to have a well-deserved drink. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
You're here.
Right. So here's what I'm going to suggest. What we had hoped for is many of you wrote your cards diligently. Thank you. Particularly those of you who were so careful to make your writing intelligible. And we appreciate all the ideas that you poured in. And people were asked to identify what was the biggest challenge and what were some of the solutions and ideas that they heard. So we tried to collate that, Margaret and I, in the green room, trying to figure out what do we think the key concepts have been. And then these folks are going to give us a bit of their own spice and ideas. And then we're going to put the house lights up and you're going to talk to us. So here's what we heard, and we've just thematically organized these. Access in all sorts of different kinds of ways. Choice, housing choice, employment choice, choice of neighborhood, connectivity, the importance of public space, creativity and the arts, very, very broadly defined. Community, and particularly community empowerment, which you heard threading through and through. If I've missed one, I expect you to tell me. And then the last one was the civic, this whole notion of how we redefine the civic. So those are the sort of concepts and threads that we think have been repeated. We had talked before the summit opened, we thought we could have played summit bingo. You know, where you sit there with the 10 or 12 words and you wait to see how many times is resilience uttered, or how many times did somebody say drill down. But so instead, we didn't do it that way, so we extracted them this way, and I'm going to be interested to hear from you if I've missed some. What we're specifically wanting to talk now about is what's a very particular idea, either a policy idea that the government could do, maybe the local government, or maybe it's a civic idea that we're going to collectively do, based on what you've just heard, because you had a whole cross-section mix of ideas. So as you can see, we've got Donnel and Ken and Euan and Tommy and Margaret. They represent a whole bunch of different sectors. I'm going to turn to Margaret first, who's been here for the whole shebang. Her first summit as executive director. Not your first summit as an attender. You've been to several, I think.
Absolutely not, no.
So take it. Start.
Okay, so
what did you hear?
So thank you, Mary. And we did actually read through all the cards, and so there were, surprisingly enough, there were many, many different requests. So I'm going to sort of pull out the couple that are near and dear to my heart. And since we started the yesterday's summit session with Penn, and a number of you were really excited about that, and we just heard a number of talks about infrastructure projects in New York. I'm going to throw that one out there as one of the primary concerns of many of you. And I guess the question I would throw out to all of you and to the rest of the group here is, does New York City have the will and the sort of consensus building ability to actually do the large infrastructure projects that we need to do? And what Tom Wright and I were discussing, can we do them in a shorter amount of time and for less money? So all of those things are going to be really critical to moving forward, and I think you heard from everyone, the last group, how important that is to New York City's future. And as Mary and I have joked about since I joined the staff, I spent 7 years with the New York City Department of Transportation, being up nights thinking about things falling apart. So I'm happy to say I now I don't necessarily still sleep nights, but
But you're part of the solution.
I hopefully am part of the solution. So the other infrastructure piece I'll throw out, this is the first conference I would say I've been to in probably 7 years where no one wrote down City Bike, even though we didn't talk about it. So the expansion of City Bike, and I personally, since I now have to work in Midtown, would like a safe route across Midtown and through Midtown, both crosstown and uptown and downtown, so I can ride unfettered.
All right, so I'm looking for someone who can crib a list for me. So the first thing was the idea, can we still do big? Can we still do big investment? And the second thing is bike lanes.
And I have one more, which I'm
all right. Let's hear the third one.
Which is nothing to do with, well, it's sort of to do with infrastructure. It's about regulations. We heard a lot of complaints about the regulatory structure in New York, which touches zoning, land use, preservation, vending. We heard food trucks, outdated regulations, which keep us from being able to use parking spaces to put food trucks. That will get me in trouble with my old agency too. And public space designation. There was a great image that Tim Tompkins showed of Times Square with all of the characters lined up. How do we regulate and how do we manage new public space, which is so important to all of us as part of our new civic commons.
So some kind of a new conception of the role of regulation. How does it need to be upgraded, altered, thrown out, brought in?
And quickly. We shouldn't take some of these regulations, as Sweeney pointed out when we were talking about taxis, 50 to 60 years old. Our zoning is old. All of these things are old.
Older than us.
We can't take another 50 years to look at these. We've got to do them much more quickly.
Okay, so some kind of zoning reform. Yes, you should feel free to applaud. That would be sort of amusing if you did. Yes, exactly. All right. Euan, you're back from New York, having had a lovely little northern holiday in Toronto for a year where running the city is just a piece of cake. Give us your idea.
So I just want to actually respond to what you said. I think there's a connection clearly between regulation and being able to build the type of infrastructure we need in the city. And by infrastructure, I would say it's not just hard infrastructure, it's not just the physical infrastructure, but it's our jobs and our business infrastructure. And I represent the city and I work for the Department of Small Business Services. And one of the things that we're doing that we launched in July of this year and that we're trying to do on a very accelerated timescale is an initiative called Small Business First, where essentially we're working with all the regulatory agencies, so with DOT, with DEP, with DCA, all the different soup of acronyms, to look at precisely that issue of how businesses are regulated and how we get a better balance. Clearly, there's a purpose for public regulation, protect health and safety. Those are very necessary things, but we need to make sure that we're putting in place smart regulation and partnering with the business community so that that infrastructure can thrive and grow in the city. And so we're working very hard on that at the moment and hope to come out with a set of recommendations later this year and implement those rapidly.
Euan, we have a whole committee for you. We've named it for you, called Q, the Committee for Urban Entrepreneurship. And you're an honorary member, and it's meeting on the 11th of November. I'll be sending you a note about that.
Excellent.
And anybody else want to come? Yes, exactly. Thank you for applauding. And we had a whole session on that, around how do we cultivate and how do cities need to be hospitable to entrepreneurs, and big bad regulations sometimes impede that. I should also say we had a card, I read this card, whoever put it forward, to say not everybody that's in business thinks they're an entrepreneur. Some people that are in business are just in business. They have a small business, they share it with their family members, and they feel like entrepreneurs are only for people in your 20s. I'm in my 50s. I was flattered to think that you have to be in your 20s to be an entrepreneur. So we heard you on that. So it's small business and entrepreneurs, right?
And also how we deliver services to people in the right way. I mean, 50% of entrepreneurs in this city are foreign born.
Yeah.
So there are issues with the way that the city engages with people from those communities, whether that's language access, meeting people in their communities rather than expecting them to come to government. And those are things that we're very focused on.
Right. One of the participants in our session on entrepreneurship was talking about Queens and was talking about the high immigrant startup population.
Yep.
There, yeah. Okay, let's change gears. Donnel, what's your idea?
Goodness. Our idea is to bring solar-powered wireless mesh network to the Rockaways in Staten Island and other areas that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy as a resiliency measure. Obviously, the solar power allows the wireless mesh networks to create an intranet system that will allow local small businesses, there's actually 200 of them that are impacted, to communicate with one another about whether or not they have power. And we've formed 3 community resiliency hubs that have a mix of solar PV, CHP, combined heat and power gas turbines, that will allow them to basically have energy in the event of, God forbid, another blackout. So in the event of grid failure or telecom failure, these communities will function. They will have safe, warm spaces that have locally produced renewable energy, and they'll have a communication system that will allow them to communicate with one another about who has power and who doesn't. Now, what's interesting for the city of New York, I think, which is why I'm here, is the idea that you can take this idea of distributed generation of power, right, and apply it to financially underserved communities across the city. So if you apply this idea to NYCHA and public housing, for example, NYCHA residents would get free internet, which would be awesome. NYCHA would save $100 million per year, which could be reinvested in job creation, et cetera. There'd be a public health benefit as you retrofit those buildings and remove kind of particulate matter. You decrease asthma rates for the children in NYCHA, which would be awesome. And so, there's carbon emissions reduction. So I think that's the big idea I have for, distributed clean energy for low-income populations across New York, which not only helps with resiliency, but there's a bunch of triple and quadruple bottom line social and environmental benefits.
I mean, this is one of the things that we've aspired to. We talked about it yesterday, those of you that were here, around community-based resilience, that sometimes the solutions that you incubate after a shock end up having all sorts of value in other applications, right? So a bit of a perverse opportunity, but what you're suggesting is it would benefit neighborhoods that weren't affected by Sandy. It would strengthen the local in every case, right?
That's right. And what's cool about it is that it would provide financial returns to investors, and so that it's financeable.
Right.
And it can be sustainable. It's not just dependent on city.
Right. Did the bean counters hear that? It's financeable. Okay. Great. Ken.
So we've talked about 200,000 new housing units. Nobody's really talked about schools. As somebody who's raised 3 kids in New York City and hire architects from all over the world, the issue really is how do you match great schools with the up-and-coming residential districts throughout the city? And I think what you need to do is actually put the SCA under the purview of city planning so that the seats are actually in place before the developers build their new residential towers, as opposed to 10 years after they're completed.
So we're giving it to city planning. They'll be busy.
They'll be very busy.
That's good.
But you have to plan for the schools, and they have to be built before you build the 200,000 residential units.
Well, we certainly have had that conversation, repeated that theme, that we have to have these things integrated and done at the same time, not one intervention only. What was that great phrase that was said? What did Harriet Tregoning say, Margaret? Why would we ever invest, do you remember, who can help me? Why would we ever invest in a piece of infrastructure that didn't actually benefit the local community? We thought it was a wonderful phrase and the same kind of notion. Why would we ever take one particular step in a neighborhood and not make sure that we were addressing all the others? Okay, schools first. Carl Weisbrod's big job. Tommy?
Well, it's a Friday afternoon, and I'm not sure that my idea is going to be a big idea because I thought about it 30 minutes ago. So can it be big if it's that recent? But it's practical. And it begins with a simple idea that we are living at a moment in time that in every possible way has higher architectural ambition. And I think that if we start with the idea we need to have ultimately a city that's not only dense and practical but more beautiful, which I think we can have, I would say as a developer, the practical side of me would communicate to everybody here, design begins with a fundamental choice. Are you doing a project as of right or going through a special permit? They're really binary. Special permit is a very burdensome process. It gives you access often to heightened setback waivers, liberates developers and architects to create new building forms. As of right projects ultimately have to be executed within zoning formulas that really date back 50 years.
Right.
I think we're now at a point where there needs to be a third way. A process that's administrative, that doesn't go through an 18-month political process ending at the city council, that allows a professional body to look at projects that aren't adding density, no economic stakes here, that have ability to get beyond the profile curves, the sky exposure plane, that today really controls many of the projects that we do that are as of right. We will produce better architecture and better economics if we ultimately develop an idea that builds on something like that.
Better, so better, it'll be a better looking, better design, and it'll be more affordable, maybe?
Maybe more market responsive.
More market responsive?
Sure.
Okay, and you think more beautiful? I heard that. Yes?
I did.
Okay. Margaret?
So, well, I'm interested in the more beautiful part. We had some interesting discussions yesterday about how you incentivize, how you even just talk about everyone in this room probably would have a different opinion about what's beautiful. We had there was a discussion in our preservation panel about should we landmark the New York City skyline, which I think is not probably a place anyone wants to go, but it was talked about. So it's kind of subjective. I think there was a,
By its nature.
But quality, I think everyone would want. How do you incentivize people to design for with the public good in mind, so that you're actually contributing something that is substantial and of benefit to everyone? So
I mean, maybe we should expand Harriet's challenge. Why would you ever build something that's ugly? Why can't we have it all? Why can't we have something that's functioning and builds resilience and is attractive and appealing? Isn't that what part of livability is? Do we have to settle?
well, you started this.
Yes,
say
I'm
no.
happy to answer. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Remember, you're seeking height and setback relief, and as you know today, you only get that through a special permit. That can be an 18 to 24-month process. I'm advocating, and it typically comes with density and typically comes to landmark transfer. What I'm advocating is a process of 3 to 6 months that goes through an agency that's got ultimately the discretion, because it's staffed correctly, to make judgments about the quality of design and really just give some physical relief to the way we organize our massing, because we have an economy locally that today has gotten well beyond the zoning. We're doing a lot of different kind of residential in Midtown. We're doing commercial in residential districts, and yet we're bound to ultimately conceptions that go back to the 1961 zoning, the 1982, Midtown zoning.
So you're reiterating Margaret's point around regulatory reform. Okay, so let's put the house lights up. I'm going to summarize what we've got so far. We can do big infrastructure. We can do a big project. 2, bike lanes, because Margaret is Margaret, bike lanes. 3, regulatory reform or upgrading or better thinking around that. 4, something that benefits small business, Euan, that's on your shoulders. 5, the solar mesh networks. Donnel, did I get it right? Is it a solar mesh network?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. 6, schools. Let's make sure that we do schools, and we're going to give schools to the City Planning Commission. Lucky them. 7, we're going to have some accelerated beauty in the city. Like my short form? It's a tall
process.
It's a tall, a beautiful
The beauty's the second
process.
stage.
Okay. All right. Give me 3 more. That's 7. I need 3 more smart ideas that you heard that you can say really short, in short, breathy sentences. I insisted they be pithy. I think they did a good job. Where are you? Yes, Colin, quickly, briefly.
Well, I was thinking about the renaissance of innovation, but what about the internet?
What about the internet? I've heard of it.
Mayors talk about, public internet, allowing public to get online. Can we get mayors, can we get government to participate in that space?
Yeah, more digital interaction. So I'm going to make that number 8. Yes, is that what you, did I paraphrase you correctly? Just getting, we have this wonderful, in our Civic Commons work, we discovered that fabulous city in Estonia, Tallinn, where everything is digitized and everyone has access regardless of income. Okay, so you want a kind of digital city hall, yes? Or more?
It'll become more participatory because for the
Right.
beautification, for the special permitting, you'll get more feedback from the public.
Sure. Okay, another ideas. Yes, sir. Will.
Pedestrian safety,
Pedestrian safety, I need a specific idea.
crosswalk safety, more countdowns
More countdowns.
more countdown timers.
Faster, we're going to walk faster. We're fixing Will, I'll do whatever you want. We want to fix the crosswalks. Okay, who else? Yes, sir.
Combine design with programming.
Yeah, integrate design and programming, right. The architects in the world all just heard you say that, absolutely. How do we make sure that the design and the actual use is coordinated? Thank you, design and programming. Yes, Daniel.
Look at Seattle's Department of Neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Figure out how we can do that here.
A Department of Neighborhoods. You know, Carl, do you like that one? Somebody from Seattle here? Carl Weisbrod talked about decentralizing city community planners to work in local neighborhoods with access to the capital budget. I'm looking to Margaret to concur. Am I saying it right?
HBD now have essentially a deputy commissioner for neighborhood development. So I think there's a move towards that from what we hear.
More Seattle in New York. Okay, who else has got something? We're at 11. I love it when we exceed. Yes, at the back, sir.
How about a real high-speed train system?
Yeah.
How about a real one? Where are we going?
Going where?
At least the Eastern Corridor. Get rid of those carbon-emitting Delta
Yeah. Yeah, let's get serious about rail. Yeah, I mean, that speaks to Margaret's first point about we can do big, we can imagine big.
That's big. That's big, Charles.
Part of what we wrestle with at MAS is how do we make sure that we have a big vision and understand those big interventions, but always make sure that things are grounded in the local. So can we do both? We are schizophrenic at MAS. We think we can. We think we can do both. Okay. Yes, sir. There's two of you, one before the other. You.
Infrastructure bank via real progressive tax.
Yeah. Create a progressive tax that creates an investment fund for an infrastructure bank, like exists in the Global South, right? Okay, great. Behind you. Say an FAR bank for?
Affordable housing.
Yeah, you mean Jesse's idea. Yes, well, we'll just do Jesse's idea. Yes, the Community Development Corp. Yes, okay, do what Jesse said. What else? Who else? And who am I missing? Yes, yes.
Zero accidents.
Say it again.
Zero accidents.
Yes, 0 accidents, absolutely. Yes.
A place where out-of-towners could go, like community centers, and local people and learn more about New York City.
That's an interesting idea. You know, in the Civic Commons, we've talked, that's back to this, can we get design and programming to be closer aligned? Can we have newcomer sort of places where you can offer some hospitality to an out-of-towner to tell them how things work? It's a great idea. Yes, yes, okay, look at all these hands, that's good. Yes, you both, one of you.
Incentives for property owners to rent to local mom and pop stores, but
Yeah.
Yep.
disincentives to rent to national chains, perhaps through tax policy.
Yes, yes,
working on
yes. Yes, it's a sophisticated idea, and how do we retain that local business, and is it incentives, and how do we discourage monocultures with big chains? I agree. Behind you, yes.
The U.S. Constitution is essentially anti-urban and it gives more power.
Do you want to just change it? How long you got?
The idea of the Parliament of Mayors is
Yep.
brilliant.
Yeah, the Parliament of Mayors, what Benjamin Barber talked about, and Paul Romer had a version of that, yes. Well, you know, I can tell you that in our advocacy with other cities around the country, and increasingly globally with our civil society partners, increasingly we talk about governance, not government, because we want to get workarounds, exactly that there are other ways to create these kinds of policy initiatives and new ideas. Right, okay, yes.
Better investment in participatory planning tools. It's a really serious investment in that process.
You're singing our song. You're singing the MES song. Better investment in participatory planning tools. Thanks, Scott. Okay, a few more. Yes, ma'am.
Much more integration of environmental science in all of this planning.
Yeah, make sure that we get the green in. Yes, Lynn?
The young poet at the end of the day yesterday brought up, I think, the biggest elephant in the room, that if we have disproportionate federal spending for military-industrial complex, we're going to start this.
That's a pretty profound note, exactly. You want to hear? Yes, okay. Lynn, I'm not going to try to paraphrase it. Bellow it out. Stand up and say it loudly.
So the young poet at the end of the main session yesterday
Sorry, I missed him.
Do you see what I see? And he was saying how the military-industrial complex is essentially starving our city. I mean, ability for us to really function as we could. It's a big idea.
Anybody got something not quite so big that they want to end on, or shall we end with world peace, which would be fine? Yes, Jack.
Bring back your commuter tax from another state, like New Jersey, until Christie gives back.
The tunnel.
Oh, Jack, you're taking the gloves off. Okay, so I appreciate all of it. You should get with that woman who wants to create a nice welcoming center for people from out of town. Maybe you should talk. Listen, you've been yes, one more, go, loud.
Don't build solid waste transfer stations at playgrounds, playing fields, and across from public housing, and call it sustainability and environmental justice. And they're going to house radioactive waste at 91st Street.
Right.
On a floodplain, in a 10-story
Right.
All of the wonderful projects that you've heard today won't exist if this is the way that they structure the garbage to go out. We can still have it go out by truck right now. It's going to cost excess $2 billion to truck it all the way to the east side, only to barge it all the way around the island to New Jersey, where it's going to the same waste energy.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Got it. Okay, at the back. Yes, one last one. Yes. Can you yell again? Can we hear the simple one for garbage? Clean it up. All right.
Yes,
all right, on that very practical note, would you thank our stalwart panel who played the wrap-up? Hold on to your seats. Would you welcome, please, to the MAS Summit stage, Jonathan Hollander, who will introduce Michelle Dorrance. Come on.